Hey there, I'm Scott. Thank you for stopping by. I'm the owner of sawsonskates.com, where I share easy woodworking plans and space-saving workshop solutions. I'd like to show you how I turned a few pieces of leftover lumber into this charming log cabin bird feeder, the perfect spot for my feathered friends to enjoy a snack. You can download this plan and hundreds of other easy-to-build projects on my website, sawsonskates.com. All my plans include a material list, diagrams, and detailed step-by-step instructions. To get your plan to build this project, click the link in the description box below. I made this project with cedar, which can trigger allergies in some people, myself included. While I always wear a respirator for any woodworking project, I also try to work outdoors whenever possible to minimize exposure in enclosed spaces. To build the bird feeder's walls, I needed some logs. To make them, I set my table saw and used a push block to rip them to width. Using my trim router and a round over bit, I removed the sharp edges, giving the logs a more cabin-like appearance. I adjusted the bit to remove about the same amount of material as 3 or 4 passes with sandpaper. You can use sandpaper if you don't have a router, but it will be a bit slower. You can make the bottom of the bird feeder using a board like a 1x6 and rip it to width with a table saw, but I didn't have one on hand, so I glued up 2 smaller boards instead. First, I cut 2 pieces of wood longer than I needed for the bottom. After gluing the boards together, I'll cut it to the correct length. To ensure a strong glue joint, I started by removing one edge from the boards. I placed the board next to the blade and gently snugged the rip fence next to it. This method allowed me to shave off a thin amount of material. I repeated this step for the other board. To ensure the feeder could withstand the elements, I applied an exterior waterproof glue to one edge. To help spread the glue, I placed it next to the other board and moved it back and forth. I tightened the clamps until they were just snug. Once the glue was dry, I ripped it to width using my table saw. Some viewers commented that my riving knife appears to be missing, but it's there, just hidden by the camera angle. This safety device prevents kickback when your workpiece catches on the blade, forcing the material back towards you with great force and at high speed. A riving knife reduces the risk of wood under tension from pinching behind the blade, or a workpiece from snagging the blade if it drifts away from the fence. With my miter saw, I cut the bottom to length. I'll leave a link for the miter saw station plans in the description box below. Using my miter saw, I cut 4 long logs and 12 short ones. Tip: I set a stop so I could cut the pieces to the same length. With my trim router and round over bit, I matched the ends to the edge's rounded profile. I used my air nailer to assemble the bird feeder. I'll leave a link for the air compressor cart plans in the description box below. I applied glue to a long log, placed it on the bottom, and attached it using brad nails. Brad nails can sometimes curve rather than go straight if they hit a hard obstruction like a knot, so you want to make sure your hands are far enough away if that should happen. I repeated this step for the other side. I applied glue to the end of the bottom and centered a short log using my Craig multi-mark. I attached it using brad nails. I repeated this step for the other side. For the second layer, using my miter saw, I cut 6 long logs and 10 short ones. I applied glue to the long edge and centered a long log using my multi-mark. I attached it using my brad nailer. I applied glue to the short edge, positioned a short log, and attached it using brad nails. I repeated this step for the second short and long logs. Then, I repeated these steps for 2 more layers. I'll take care of that off camera while you check out the brand new Saws on Skates t-shirts. I'll leave a link for them in the description box. For the 5th layer, I attached a log to each end. For layers 6 through 11, I cut 16 short logs. On the short edge, I made pencil marks and applied glue between them. I positioned a log on the short end and attached it with my brad nailer. I applied glue to each side, positioned a short log, and tacked it in place. I repeated these steps for 5 more layers. For the final layer, I applied a dab of glue to each end, positioned a log, and attached it with brad nails. To ensure a strong connection, I clamped the assembly and allowed it to dry while I moved on to making the gables. I adjusted my miter saw to 45 degrees and cut an angle on one end of a board. After flipping the workpiece toward me, I positioned the blade at the gable's peak and made the second cut. I repeated these steps for the second gable. For an exact fit, I centered the gable on the side. With a pencil, I made reference marks on each side of the logs. I set my Craig multi-mark to the log's height. Using my multi-mark, I transferred the height to each side of the gable. With an X, I marked the area I wanted to remove. I repeated these steps for the second gable on the other end. Tip: to avoid confusion, I labeled the walls and gables A and B to ensure proper placement. Using my scroll saw, I removed the waste area from the gable. With my trim router and a round over bit, I matched the gable's bottom edge to the log's rounded profile. I applied glue to the end, positioned the gable, and attached it using my brad nailer. Watch out for glue squeeze out. It can ooze between the logs and leave your project looking messy. But don't worry, cleaning it is a breeze. Just grab a toothpick and run it along the seams to remove the extra glue. I didn't have any boards wide enough to make the roof section, so I followed the same method I used to make the bottom, gluing 2 smaller boards together and then ripping to width using my table saw. At the miter saw, I cut 2 roof sections to length. To help position the brad nails, I set my multi-mark and marked a light pencil line on each end. I applied glue to the gable, centered the narrow roof section from side to side, and attached it using brad nails. I repeated this step to attach the wide roof section. To attach the hanger, I measured in from each edge. Using the side of my awl, I made a flat spot at each mark. In the flat spot, I used my awl to make a starting point for a drill bit. Using a drill bit, I made pilot holes for the screw eyes. Then, I drove a screw eye into each hole. I cut a piece of jute twine to length and tied it to the screw eyes. With some leftover wood, I made a charming log cabin bird feeder that's sure to become a favorite hangout for my feathered friends. I kept my feeder pretty basic, but you could customize yours by adding plexiglass to reduce the risk of squirrels eating all the seeds. To get your copy of this plan, visit my site sawsonskates.com using the link in the description box below. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it the thumbs up. It's one of the best ways to support my building plans.